Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you just found this place, then welcome, and if you're returning, then I'm glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we create and theory craft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Today, we are continuing our Gloomhaven series of character builds, where we take characters from the hit board game Gloomhaven and try to recreate them in Dungeons & Dragons. Today is also another locked character class, which means that there are spoiler warnings ahead. We're going to be recreating the Sun character from Gloomhaven, and so if you don't know what that character is and you didn't want it spoiled for yourself, whether you were playing through Gloomhaven or wanted to play through in the future, then I'd recommend pausing the video now and coming back to it at a later time. I won't take any offense. If you already know what the character is, or don't really care about spoilers, or just want to see how this build works in Dungeons & Dragons, then by all means, come along for the journey as we explore the build. I'll pause now for a moment before we start the build, but this is our last final warning about spoilers. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get started. Today we are recreating the Sun class, also known as the Sun Keeper. The Sun Keeper is a very big frontline and tanky character of the Gloomhaven character classes. They're unlocked through either personal quests or just being a really good person in Gloomhaven, or a really good party, I suppose. And basically they are the Gloomhaven world equivalent of a paladin. This means that when we're looking at what we need and what we want to recreate, Paladin's probably going to be pretty tempting to take. We're essentially looking for a character that is really good at tanking a lot of damage and has a lot of access to damage reduction. They do also have a little bit of support capability, and there's a build that is supported through the cards in Gloomhaven for that. They also have access to some pretty good damage output, and pretty consistent at that. They have access to on-demand advantage, which they get by usually consuming light. They are also another elemental class, and light is their forte. So when we're looking overall at what we need, we're going to want to be able to do a little bit of support with some healing and some commands. We can have allies attack or move, and we can also heal them, of course. We're also definitely going to want to be consuming and creating light, or just using spells from D&D that are reminiscent of the light element in Gloomhaven. We're going to want to have access to on-demand advantage to help spike our consistent damage, because that's really how the Sunkeeper does a lot of their damage. And then finally, the thing that we're going to want above all else is damage reduction. We're going to want as many different sources of different things that we can consider damage reduction, and really just become a very heavy presence on the battlefield that is going to be hard to ignore for our enemies. Now, the astute among you may have noticed that this new character class is a new lineage which we haven't seen yet, and that is a Valrath. Last time, our other locked class, the Angry Face, was of a lineage that we'd actually already seen, so when we read the flavor text, we only need to read half, because the other half we'd already discussed before with one of our starting classes. Since the Valrath is brand new, though, we're going to be reading the entire flavor text all together, so let's jump into that before we start the build. The Valrath Sunkeeper. Though their demon-like qualities make them feared by many, Valraths are, for the most part, well-mannered and gentle, preferring to solve problems through diplomacy rather than violence. They come from a dark and bloody heritage of genocide and warfare, and as they have become more civilized, have simply made concerted efforts to put their past behind them. Valraths pride themselves on being able to integrate themselves peacefully into human society, often becoming wealthy merchants or influential politicians. Perhaps the most prideful of the Valraths can be found in a sect of Sunkeepers, those who have been trained to tap into long-dormant demonic powers and harness them for the purpose of righteousness. A Sunkeeper goes beyond merely forsaking her heritage, and instead uses it to uplift society, healing others and rebuking evil forces. They often travel the world seeking out situations where they can demonstrate their brilliant powers. So starting off in character creation now, with the actual beginning of our build, we're going to have to pick a lineage for our Valrath. Now, because a Valrath is a demon person, demon people already sort of exist in D&D, and those are tieflings, obviously. We could still go with custom lineage, but I think we're going to pick tiefling for this because there are a few mechanical benefits of tiefling that we would get that are just nice to have and pretty thematic for our Valrath character. Feel free to mix it up if you really want to, but given that there's already support for this type of lineage in D&D, I'm going to stick with tiefling. As a tiefling, we're going to gain a couple of ability score increases, which I'll touch on once we get to our stats, but the main thing is that we get dark vision, resistance to fire damage, as well as some innate spell casting. Now, depending on if we can take specific bloodlines, such as the ones that appeared in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, we'll actually want to do that. And we're going to take the bloodline of Zariel. The reason I say the bloodline of Zariel would fit best for our Valrath Sunkeeper is because it allows us to switch out the spellcasting options that we would normally get for some that are a little bit more martial focused and kind of more paladin-esque. It gives us a few smite spells, basically. It also removes the ability for us to cast darkness innately, which I think is pretty thematic given that we are the Sun Keeper and we're really focused on getting light spells as opposed to darkness spells, so we don't really want that. Feel free to take whatever sort of lineage or an option that you might want for a tiefling, but for us, we're going to go with Bloodline of Zariel for our tiefling Valrath Sunkeeper. For our stats now, we're going to be forced to put the +2 into our charisma and the +1 into strength. Technically, with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, there's the optional rule where we can switch that around to be whatever we want, but honestly, we like those ability score increases for the character we're building, so we're just going to go along with that. With point buy, as usual, we're going to wind up with the following stats. We want 16 strength, 8 dexterity, 15 constitution, 8 intelligence, 12 wisdom, and 15 charisma. Now we've got a couple uneven ability scores, which isn't super nice, but we can make do with that for now. As usual, feel free to redistribute these ability scores as you see fit, but honestly, for right now, this is perfectly fine. For our background, this time actually matters, and it kind of matters a lot. So for our command abilities, we don't really want to spend levels going into a different class to pick up something that can give us our command abilities. Instead, we want to do it through some feats, and those feats kind of require a specific background. We're also not getting a free feat at level 1 from our lineage specifically, so this is kind of a way to help with that, but you'll see what I mean once we get into it. Basically, we're going to pick the background of Knight of Solamnia. Knight of Solamnia is technically a Dragonlance campaign specific background, so make sure you get your DM's permission before taking this, but really I think we could flavor it to be like our background is that of a Knight of the Great Oak from Gloomhaven lore. It fits pretty perfectly, and they're kind of similar, but technically this is still Dragonlance specific, so it might not be okay with your DM. However, if we do get it, then what that gives us is a few flavored background features, which are nice, but also access to the feat Squire of Solamnia right away. Squire of Solamnia is a feat that technically gives us a little bonus to our mounted combat. We can just mount and dismount a lot easier than normal. And we also get access to on-demand advantage right away when we take the feat. Basically, a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus, we can just choose to get on-demand advantage when we're making an attack. We hit with that attack, it'll also do an extra d8 damage, so it's a nice little damage boost as well. Overall, this is pretty much just our first little step into on-demand advantage. It doesn't really require light to do so, but that's still fine. And if your DM thought this was too powerful, that's, I guess, okay too, but we do want the feat because the feat is a prerequisite to later feats, which are going to be used to pick up our command abilities. So hopefully that's okay with your DM. All right, time to start the build. At level 1, we are just starting off as Paladin. I mentioned before that the Sunkeeper basically is a Paladin in Gloomhaven, and honestly, that is completely true. They even have a card that is literally called Lay on Hands. Because of this, Paladin is the obvious way to go, at least at level 1. There will be some other sort of multi-classing and interesting options we pick up later, but for level 1 we're a Paladin, and we get Paladin stuff. Divine Sense and, of course, Lay on Hands. Divine Sense is a little feature that lets us detect undead or fiends or celestials that are nearby. The real nice feature that Paladins get is Lay on Hands. We get a pool of hit points equal to 5 times our Paladin level, so right now it's 5, and we can spend those to either heal hit points from a creature, whether that's us or an ally, or we can cure a poison or a disease. Really, this is usually just thought of as healing, but if you find a situation where you're going to use it for curing that poison or disease, go right ahead. At level 2, I'm immediately going to jump ship and we're going to go with Fighter. I said a Sunkeeper was essentially a paladin. I didn't say I had to fight like it all the time. There's a reason for this, and it'll show up later on in Fighter, but at Fighter 1, we're going to pick up Second Wind and a fighting style. Second Wind is a self-heal. You get a D10 plus fighter level hit points back after using a bonus action. And for the fighting style, we're going to want to pick the defense fighting style. Defense increases our AC, and increasing our AC essentially increases damage reduction since we just don't get hit. That's what we want. We are a tanky character first and foremost. We pick defense. Level 3, we are a fighter 2, and we get action surge. We can now have one turn where we really just pop off. At level 4, we are a fighter 3, and fighter 3 gives us our subclass. Here's why I wanted to go fighter. Our subclass offers us a couple good choices, but the main one we want is Samurai. Samurai has access to Fighting Spirit, and Fighting Spirit is what gives us our on-demand advantage consistently. Beyond just the Squire of Solamnia feat, whether we could take it or not, Samurai just gives us the ability to say we are going to have advantage on all our attacks for a turn. If we use Action Surge to attack more than once in a round, or even more than twice in a round eventually, then that'll work as well, and we can just have advantage on all our attacks. Again, it's not really light themed, but we don't really care. We just care about the fact that we have on-demand advantage, which is what the Sunkeeper has access to. The other feature of Fighting Spirit is that when we use it to gain that on-demand advantage, we also gain temporary health. Gloomhaven Shield I have often referred to through temporary health, because temporary health effectively acts like damage reduction, which is what Gloomhaven Shield is. However, I also mentioned when we pick up defense that that kind of also acts like Gloomhaven Shield, because that is sort of damage reduction and all that sort of stuff. Really, for the purposes of this video, I am counting everything that reduces the amount of times we can get hit or the amount of damage we take when we get hit as Gloomhaven Shield. In some other ones, we're a bit more picky and choosy as to what really counts as a Gloomhaven Shield effect, but here we're just trying to get as much of it as possible. At level 5, we are a fighter 4, and we're a level behind in terms of extra attack, but we have Action Surge, so that's not too bad, especially since we have so much on-demand advantage, hopefully, that we can actually kind of make up for it. 2 attacks are usually better than 1 with advantage, but it is what it is. For now, though, we're here at fighter 4, and that means we get another ASI or feat. And here we're going to take our feat. This is why we needed Squire of Solamnia so badly, because now it's time to take the feat Knight of the Crown, which has Squire of Solamnia as a prerequisite. Again, this is also technically a Dragonlance specific feat, but assuming that we were able to take Squire of Solamnia, I would assume that we're able to take this. And the reason I want to take this is because it's a support ability that lets us have a command that is very thematically appropriate, not because it's busted in any way, shape, or form. Knight of the Crown increases our Strength, Dex, or Constitution by 1, and we're going to pick Strength here to push it up to 17. Yes, that makes it an even, but we'll worry about that later. The other half of this feat, though, which is why we really wanted it, is that it allows us to use our bonus action to command an ally within 30 feet of us to attack using their reaction. If their attack hits, they can also add a D8 to the damage roll, which is a really nice boost. We can use this command a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus as well, which is also very nice. At level 6, we're a fighter 5, and we can finally attack twice on our turn because we got extra attack. Now, with extra attack, our on-demand advantage is twice as effective. It's 4 times as effective as soon as we use Action Surge to attack multiple times. And because our bonus action can be used as a command, that means we can still give an ally an attack and sort of count that as a 5th attack for us, or at least just count it as a lot more damage being dealt to your enemies. Really awesome, even though we were a level behind to pick up the extra attack feature. At level 7, it's time to jump back into Paladin. We got the scaling that we wanted from getting extra attack and our ability score improvement, and we also picked up the on-demand advantage that we wanted. So, we're now going back to Paladin 2 to actually get some effects to make us really feel like the Sunkeeper. With Paladin 2, we get access to Spellcasting, Divine Smite, and a fighting style again. For the fighting style, I'd recommend either Protection or Interception. Both of these are defensive features that allow us to protect our allies, making us much more of a tank. I'm personally going to take Interception because that is a relatively new fighting style from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything that actually allows you to use your reaction to interpose yourself between an enemy and an ally, and actually reduce the damage that that ally takes from an attack. This essentially means that we are literally giving our allies the Gloomhaven shield effect, which we couldn't ask for a better way to do that. For spell casting, you can pick any spells you want, to be honest. There's not too much that we really need, and we're probably just going to use them for smites anyways. However, I will highly recommend Shield of Faith, as that is again another boost to our AC, which is a boost to our tankiness, which is another Gloomhaven shield effect, and that is exactly what the Sunkeeper wants. For Divine Smite, the Sunkeeper doesn't really have access to an actual on-demand smite feature, but they can consume light in Gloomhaven to usually deal some extra damage. So we're going to count our Divine Smite as exactly that. Infusing/consuming radiant energy, or the light element in this case, to just add on flat extra damage. At level 8, we're going to jump back to Fighter for Fighter 6, which gets us another ASI/feat and gets us back on track for scaling appropriately with our ability scores. For this ability score improvement/feat, we're going to take a feat, and we're going to take our next command ability, which is Knight of the Rose. Knight of the Rose is again a Dragonlance feat, so all the same stuff from before about Dragonlance feats. But assuming we can take it, then we get the half feat part of it, where we can improve Wisdom, Constitution, or Charisma by 1, and we get a Rally ability. The Rally ability lets us roll a d8 and give an ally within 30 feet of us temporary hit points equal to the number rolled, plus a proficiency bonus, plus the ability score modifier that we chose to increase with the feat. It doesn't really matter too much between Constitution or Charisma as to which ability we improve. Either one is going to go to 16, and then we'll be able to improve the other one later on. At level 9, we are going to jump back to Paladin to be Paladin 3, and here we get our choice of Paladin subclass. And to be honest, there's a couple good options. Obviously, Oath of Devotion is kind of the most thematically appropriate, as the Oath of Devotion is just a Paladin's Paladin, and the Sunkeeper is essentially a Paladin's Paladin. Oath of Conquest is kind of interesting. You'd have to really invest in it, but they get some features that are kind of like retaliate features, and just passive retaliate at that. The Sunkeeper has a passive retaliate build, which is the only reason I'd be interested in taking that, but we're not really going to invest that high into it, so we're not worried about that one. The one that we are going to take is the best of both worlds for these, and that is the Paladin of Redemption. The Paladin of Redemption gains a few redemption-specific spells. We're not going to use them, but they're pretty cool. The main feature, though, is the Channel Divinity. We do get a face-type feature for social interaction that we could use our Channel Divinity for, so if you're in a non-combat session, feel free to use your Channel Divinity for that. But if you're in combat, you're going to want to save your Channel Divinity for Rebuke the Violent. Rebuke the Violent is a reaction eater, so we can't use it on the same turn that we want to intercept, but it's kind of worth it. When an enemy attacks one of our allies, we can just have that enemy make a wisdom save, and on a fail, they take damage equal to the amount of damage they just dealt. That damage is radiant, though, that they take, so resistances aren't accounted for, unless they're resistant to radiant. If they succeed on the save, they still take half damage, so this is really quite good. This is more retaliate for our allies than ourselves, but it's still really nice to have, especially if there's a big enemy that hits really hard with attacks and they just landed a crit against an ally. Well, now we landed a crit against that enemy. I think this subclass is a really best of both worlds for what we want, both mechanically and thematically, so we're going to take it and be real happy that we did. At level 10, we're going to continue up Paladin to get to Paladin 4. We get another ability score increase/feat, and here we're taking the ability score increase. We rounded off one of our Constitution or Charisma last time with Knight of the Rose. So this time, we're going to round off the other two ability scores of Strength and Constitution or Charisma, whatever we didn't increase, by just taking a +1 to both of those two stats. We should now be at about 18 Strength for sure, and then 16 for our other two secondary abilities. At level 11, we're going to jump back into Fighter to gain the 7th level Fighter ability, which is our Samurai ability of Elegant Courtier. Elegant Courtier is yet another social interaction/face ability, so we'll mainly want to use it when we're not in a combat-heavy session, but it's still kind of good to have. In all honesty, we just want to continue up Fighter anyways, so we're just kind of taking this as a little ribbon feature. We're worrying about what we're actually going to get from Fighter later on. At level 12, we're now going to continue up to Fighter 8. We get another ability score improvement/feat, and while we could do something like cap our strength or just improve our charisma or constitution, we're going to go back for yet another half feat. And this half feat is actually Unearthed Arcana, so it's another thing that we're going to need to get our DM's permission for, but really hoping that we actually get this one, and I'll explain why. We are going to want to take the Unearthed Arcana feat Agent of Order. Agent of Order allows us to increase one stat of our choice by 1, and then we gain a special strike feature called Stasis Strike. We can then, once per turn, when we damage a creature within 60 feet of us, we're melee, so that's not too important, but when we do, deal an extra d8 force damage and force them to make a wisdom save. The DC for the save is based on whatever ability we increase with the feat, so that could be something like Strength, Constitution, or Charisma. Again, pick whatever we want. Constitution's always kind of nice because we're going to want to scale our health with that anyways, but you pick whatever you'd like. On a failed save, the enemy is then restrained until the start of our turn. Now, restrained is an interesting condition in D&D because it's technically more similar to Immobilize from Gloomhaven. However, for this particular build, I'm going to be counting it as a stun effect. The Sunkeeper has access to really reliable stun effects that can just cancel enemy actions in Gloomhaven, and there's really no way that a martial character can get something as powerful as that in D&D. There are some ways, but at least not that we're really building for. It'll at least still cut their speed to 0, and when they do attack, they attack with disadvantage, and when we attack with advantage. That's very similar to an actual stun effect in D&D, so it's good enough that I would say we'll count it as a Gloomhaven stun effect. We can also use this feature a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus, so we'll hopefully get some good traction out of it. But like I said, it is UA, so if you can't take it, no worries, just go back and actually improve an ability score. But ideally, we do get this so we can really feel like the Sunkeeper in terms of their control effects, not just their damage. On level 13, we're going to go back to Paladin 5. And Paladin 5 doesn't really get us too much beyond second level spell slots, given that we already have extra attack. However, the second level spell slots are great to have, especially for our Divine Smite. At level 14, we are a Paladin 6, and this gives us the amazing feature of Aura of Protection. There is now a 10-foot aura around us that just says that anyone standing in that aura, including us, gains a bonus to all their saving throws equal to our Charisma modifier. Really, that's probably somewhere in the +3 range right now, unless you somehow decided to increase that even further. Eventually, it will go up, but +3 to just all your saves is still a really great bonus to have. At level 15, we are a Paladin 7, and that is going to give us access to our next Oath of Redemption Paladin ability. This is actually another aura feature, and for us, it's specifically Aura of the Guardian. Aura of the Guardian allows us to, admittedly as a reaction, take damage that any of our allies within 10 feet of us would suffer. We can't reduce the damage, but it does prevent them from taking it, and that is what really makes us a tank in D&D. Admittedly, this is the main reason I wanted to go Oath of Redemption, beyond just the theme and the retaliate. We actually want to be a tank, not just hard to kill. And even though we don't get a taunt that incentivizes enemies to attack us, we do have the ability to just prevent damage to allies and take it ourselves. And that is enough to kind of make us feel like an actual tank. This feature is really helpful, really defensive, and even fairly thematic, as the Sunkeeper does have a card that, again, allows them to just take damage for allies. At level 16, we're a Paladin 8, and we're a nice 8-8 split between Paladin and Fighter. Here we gain another ability score improvement or feat, and we're just going to take the ability score improvement. Depending on what we took from Stasis Strike, you might actually want to do a +1 into that ability score and then +1 into something else, or you might just want to do a +2 into one of the other ability scores to increase it. For the sake of our build, I'm going to assume that with Stasis Strike, we improved our strength because we want our strength to be good anyways, and that is now 19. I'm then going to assume that we're going to put our +2 into Charisma to increase our Aura of Protection ability. If you want to switch it up, that's perfectly fine. At level 17, you can make a choice. We can either go up to Paladin 9 and then eventually Fighter 11, and this would give us access to 3rd level spell slots from Paladin, which could improve our Divine Smite, as well as give us access to Aura of Vitality. It's a pretty nice and thematic way to go. But for us, I'm going to assume that we're going to try and get some more mechanical benefits and round off our ability scores, which means that I'm actually going to jump back to Fighter 9. Fighter 9 just gives us Indomitable. There's not much else to say here. Indomitable is a nice feature for us at least because it lets us re-roll a failed saving throw. And with Aura of Protection, that actually has the potential to be pretty good. Aura of Protection gives us a good safety net for our saving throws, and the re-roll kind of ensures that we're going to get the most out of that safety net. Normally, it wouldn't be too good for a very specialized fighter, but we're happy to have this. At level 18, we're a Fighter 10, and we are here to gain our next Samurai feature. This feature is Tireless, and Tireless just says that whenever we roll initiative and we don't have a use of our fighting spirit left, we gain 1 use. This is really nice, given that it means that we will now always have access to at least 1 round of on-demand advantage no matter what. At level 19, we are a Fighter 11, and we now have extra attack times 2, which means we can now attack 3 times total when we take the attack action. This is a big boost to our damage output and is essentially our capstone ability, even though we're still getting an ASI/feat afterwards. And it's especially powerful when we couple it with our Fighting Spirit and another Action Surge, being able to attack 6 times, all with advantage, and then maybe even throw a bonus action command out to get an ally to attack as well. Finally, at level 20, we gain our last ASI/feat from Fighter 12. Here we're going to take probably a feat, though you could just do a regular ASI. Let's break it down nice and simple. If you want to be more defensive, probably increase your charisma and cap it at 20 in order to make Aura Protection a +5 bonus. That would be really awesome. Or increase your constitution to, I believe, 18 now, if not possibly 20, if you had already increased it from some other time in the past. That would just give us a lot more health, allowing us to tank a lot more damage from our Aura of the Guardian feature. The final option is what I'm going to do, and that is cap our strength at 20. Doing so increases our damage, as well as it improves the Stasis Strike DC from Agent of Order. Now the way I'm going to do this, though, is a way that we probably should have done a lot earlier, but we just didn't really find the time to, so now is still fine to have it. And that is with the Crusher feat. The Sunkeeper, according to the artwork, is supposed to use a Warhammer, and Crusher revolves around bludgeoning damage, with which a Warhammer deals. With this in mind, Crusher is going to let us increase our strength by 1 to push it to 20, which finally caps it nice and evenly, which I'm really happy about. It also gives us a little bit of push on our attacks once per turn. We can just send an enemy 5 feet. Could be potentially powerful, since that allows us a little bit of battlefield control, and the Sunkeeper doesn't really have too much push as far as I'm aware, but it's still nice to have anyways. And there's also an on-demand crit feature, which just says that after we crit this enemy, all our allies have advantage on that enemy until the start of our next turn. With so much on-demand advantage, we're hopefully going to crit an enemy fairly often. Do what you want with this last ability score improvement/feat. There's really no wrong answer. Alright, time to summarize what we have. Looking at the build, I want to start with my main regret. I am extremely disappointed that we did not get to pick up Heavy Armor Master. It's just not really reasonable to take it later on in a build, and given that we wanted our command abilities so early and we didn't get to start with a free feat, there was just no room for it. Honestly though, the passive damage reduction that the feat offers just for wearing heavy armor would have been really awesome to have had really early on, and even later on in the build technically, as it would perfectly mimic our defensive stance card. That card in Gloomhaven is what makes the Sunkeeper just so tanky. We kind of made up for it with picking up other types of damage reduction or other sources of armor class increases, but Heavy Armor Master just would have been so nice. Plus our Brute has it, so it kind of feels like we should too, but it's just disappointing that we don't. If you didn't get access to any of the Dragonlance feats, you'd probably actually have a lot more room to go back and balance out some stats, and probably take Heavy Armor Master as well, which I would really recommend at picking up at level 4 instead. In terms of our tankiness though, we're still a really prominent frontliner. We have plenty AC with heavy armor, a shield, the defense fighting style, and Shield of Faith if we're using our constitution for that. Plus we get temporary HP from our fighting spirit. Plus we have passive resist to fire damage, at least from being a tiefling, which is pretty awesome. And all in all, we're a very durable character. A couple of features I didn't actually mention for being a durable character is the Heroism spell and the Infernal Constitution feat. Heroism is a spell that is against concentration, but it just gives us temporary HP at the start of each of our turns. That's just flat damage reduction, full stop. It's basically a Gloomhaven shield effect in its own right, and that's really awesome to have as well. I just like Shield of Faith because that's a +2 bonus to AC, which means we're less likely to get hit versus reducing damage when we do get hit. So do what you want with that information. At the end of the build, it's just something nice to have mentioned. Infernal Constitution, on the other hand, is a Tiefling-specific feat that we technically have access to that gives us more elemental damage type resistances, specifically poison and cold. If you had room in the build, and you were actually playing this character in game, and you found that you were going up against a lot of enemies with cold damage or poison damage, I'd actually really recommend that, as that just gives you flat resistance and would be really nice to keep your durability up. Beyond that summary of durability, we can also deal a lot of damage. We are restricted to melee most of the time, which is unfortunate, but that shouldn't be too much of an issue, and we can let our allies deal with ranged and bringing down other types of far away or flying enemies. We have 3 attacks. We have on-demand advantage from Fighting Spirit or Squire of Solamnia. Plus, we have innate smite spells, or we have the Divine Smite feature from Paladin, which just packs on extra damage anyways. Plus, we also have the Stasis Strike from Agent of Order, which gives us an extra D8 of damage and acts like a stun effect, which is really awesome as well. Plus, on the support side of the build, our Lay on Hands feature provides us with 40 hit points to heal as needed, and we have access to some pretty strong healing spells if we really need them. Finally, our Knight of the Crown and Knight of the Rose feats also give us those powerful command support abilities that the Sunkeeper also has access to. All in all, though, if you didn't get access to those feats, obviously your feats are going to change a little bit, but in order to pick up at least some command abilities, we would want to take a 1-level dip into Order Cleric, which does have a feature that lets you basically command an ally to attack when you cast a spell on them. The feats are a little bit nicer and I think more thematic, but the Order Cleric would also work really well as well. There are probably some things that we missed, but overall I think the build as it stands gets as many of the features and mechanics as possible that the Sunkeeper does use frequently. Let me know what you thought of the build or what you would do to change it and get closer to the theme of the actual Gloomhaven character class. And thank you so much for coming on this journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.